And now it's time for another Board Game Brawl Top 10 with Nick Meanahan, sponsored by BoardGameBliss.com. Hey folks, my name is Nick, this is Board Game Brawl, and it is time once again for the obligatory Top 10 Games of the Year, this time for 2015. Yes, every reviewer is expected to do one of these lists. It's in the bylaws of the Reviewers Union. Okay, just kidding. There's no bylaws, there's no union. If there was, I probably wouldn't be allowed to be a part of it. But nevertheless, I do enjoy doing these lists. It's nice to look back and spotlight the games that were the best, according to me at least, from the past year, because I think that good games deserve recognition, and that way those games will continue, those types of games and the elements that made them special will continue to be disseminated out to the public through more and more and more games. That's at least how I feel. That's the point of awards and recognition like that when they're done properly. So I do love going through that. I will say up front that there's some things that didn't make it on the list just because of weird idiosyncrasies with how games are published and distributed. Like Elyium, I really only I got to play it this year, especially with the deluxe edition from Tasty Minstrel, and that's a wonderful game that definitely would have shot up my list. Technically, it was released last year at Essen. Fury of Dracula 3rd Edition, fantastic game. One of my favorite games of all time on my top 100 list. But unfortunately, it was only a 3rd edition of the game. Not that much different than the 2nd edition, although different in very good ways. But not enough for me to put it on the list. And so on and so forth. Spyfall technically was out last year. Things like that. And I'm not going to belabor this point too much longer, but a couple more notes. People hate my long intros. Stick around for the end of the video where I'm going to talk about my top 10 from last year, and we'll go over that and see what's still in my collection, what I still enjoy, and for what reasons. And also, I realize that this top 10 can be very anticlimactic if people were following my top 100 of the year, which unfortunately posted very close to when this list is coming out, because I had no qualms about putting brand new games on my top 100 list. So you could theoretically just follow my number one game of all time all the way back to my number 100 and see what the first 10 are that pop up for 2015. And that would be the list. I'm fully aware of that. But it is still nice to have them all conglomerated together for people who don't want to sit through my entire top 100. And let's all try to act surprised when we get to number 1, okay? Without further ado, here's my top 10 games of 2015. My number 10 is Discoveries from Asmodee. This is a wonderful game set that is the spiritual successor to the game Lewis and Clark, which is a game that I thought was very well designed, but I did not care for very much. It was just a bit too dry despite the deck building elements of it. But Discoveries just works for me. It's a dice management game. You're getting dice representing different resources, which are going to enable you to travel along the path of Lewis and Clark through these different discovery cards, which gets you points and certain other set collection bonuses. You get Native American tribes to help you out during the course of the journey to give you more and more bonuses to manipulate your dice and the different types of actions you can take. It's a wonderful game. It plays fast. It plays good with any amount of players, even with 2 players. It has beautiful artwork from Vincent Dutrait, who is just god tier art at this point. I mean, if he's got his artwork on a game, immediately people take notice, and for good reason. But fortunately, there's a fantastic game in Discoveries to back up that wonderful presentation. That is my number 10 for 2015, Discoveries from Asmodee. My number 9 is Spectre Ops from Plaid Hat Games and from Nazca Games, which is Emerson Matsuuchi, the designer of the game, who is really one of the hot new designers to look out for, in my opinion. And Spectre Ops is a perfect example of why. This is a one versus all deduction game, or sort of similar to Scotland Yard and Letters from Whitechapel, but in this game, one player is a runner trying to get through this high-tech facility in the future. The other players are hunters who are trying to, and sometimes literally, sniff him out. All the different hunters have special abilities. The runner also has a special ability to help them either stay hidden or to, once they are found out, to give them something to slip away and to disable the hunters. It's got a beautiful presentation. I love the way the board looks. There's great miniatures for all the different characters in the game. It's got a great science fiction theme, and it really comes through. It's also a lot faster than some of the other games that it is most often compared to. So for those reasons and more, just the overall presentation of it and the fun factor of it, because I do love one versus all games, Spectre Ops from Plaid Hat Games is easily my number 9 of the year. My number 8 is Shakespeare from Istari and Asmodee. This game really took me by surprise. It takes a lot for me to like a heavy Euro game. I would say this one is maybe barely heavy, maybe in some ways just considered a moderate Euro game, but even so, not typically my type of game. Really strict action efficiency, resource management, but man, I just love this game. It's so great. There's so many interesting thematic elements. You're trying to put on this play back in the era of Shakespeare, and you need to get sets designed, costumes designed. You need to write the different acts of the play and make sure you're better than all the other players. You have set rehearsals, and but all of this is done through really tight, bidding for turn order and drafting different elements like different actors you have to pay for at the end of the game. Everything is every action is so incredibly vital. Every game of this I've played is very tight at the end. And if you could pinpoint where you messed up, if I had only done this, I'd be 1 or 2 points ahead, and I'd have won the game. Now, in some games, that's very frustrating, but in Shakespeare, because the game length is not that bad, and because there are so many cool thematic elements, and again, beautiful artwork to go along with all of it, those little things that would normally aggravate me in other games actually work very, very well here. I easily forgive them because it's just such an intense, incredible experience. One of my favorite Euro games, that is Shakespeare from Istari, my number 8. My number 7 seems to have gotten lost in the shuffle, but once upon a time this year, which is a weird thing to say, it was the hottest game out there. And I think the fact that none of the inevitable expansions have come out quite yet has hurt it quite a bit. But Forbidden Stars from Fantasy Flight Games still deserves a spot on my list at number 7. This is set in the Warhammer 40k universe, which doesn't always translate well into board game form. I think the only other one that I really, really enjoy was Space Hulk. But this is a very different game than that. People have said it's a spiritual successor to StarCraft, but it's actually significantly different. You're taking your own force from the Warhammer 40k universe, whether it is the I always forget the name of them, the Space Elves, or the Imperial armies, or the Chaos armies, or the Orcs, and you have your spaceships, you have your ground units, and it's area control trying to take over different planets, but just taking over a planet is going to get you certain resources and just make things a little bit easier for you, but your ultimate goal is to take over these objectives. So it's a race to get behind enemy lines to take your objectives before the other players can and win the game, or it may go on until the end, a certain number of rounds, but either way, it's always intense. The combats in the game are incredibly interesting, where you are, putting down cards together with dice rolling, and the way that the upgrade system works is that you can swap out your starting cards to get better ones that are unique to your faction, and also increase the power of the commands that you're issuing around the board, which is another interesting thing that they carried over from StarCraft, how you issue commands with tokens that stack up, and you always resolve the ones that are on top first, so you have to try to outthink your opponent. Super interesting game. I hope that it gets more support soon, and so it's not forgotten. I doubt that it will be. There's always going to be a strong audience for this kind of game, including from me. That is Forbidden Stars from Fantasy Flight Games, my number 7. My number 6 is far and away the most hyped game of the year, and I like it a lot, just not as much as some of the other games that came out this year, obviously. That is Pandemic Legacy from Z-Man Games. I mean, what more can be said about this game that hasn't been said already? It takes the Legacy system, which I still find endlessly fascinating if it's done well to this point. And it also takes Pandemic, which is a game I kind of have fallen out of love with, but is still a very well-designed, solid, cooperative game. Mixing those two elements together, and by the way, Pandemic being a very thematic game, which is really the key part here. Mixing those elements together with the Legacy system, it's a slam dunk. Honestly, when I first heard it, I thought, well, is that really going to go together? And then I thought, yeah, you know what? That is actually perfect. I haven't even played through the entire thing quite yet, but I still love it as it is. I don't really care that it's not playable again, because there's so few games in my collection that I play as many times as I will have played Pandemic Legacy, and it's just such an incredible experience that it deserves the recognition. It really, really does, and I think it deserves to be on the top of the Board Game Geek list as well. Even if it's not my personal favorite game, I totally get it. That is Pandemic Legacy from Z-Man Games, my number 6 of the year. My number 5 is another game that came out so early in the year that I'm a bit worried that it got lost in the shuffle, and that is Elyium from Space Cowboys and from Asmodee. In fact, because it's from Space Cowboys, and it had another really big release for the year, it seems to have gotten a little bit forgotten about, which is sad, but this is a fantastic game. This is straight up mid-weight Euro set collection and bidding for different actions and drafting cards. You're trying to get these different sets of god cards representing the different Greek gods, but they all have different special powers and bonuses. Like Hades is really good at letting you sacrifice cards, which are going to which will let you put them into like the afterlife to get to the different bonuses a lot faster, because that's the thing. You have to really manage your time and how you're taking actions during the course of the game. There's only so many cards you're going to be able to stow away for points later. Zeus is all about getting straight up points, and like Athena is good at getting you different card abilities, and there's even like Apollo, who has a whole other thing where he adds a whole other board to the game. There's just some really drastic effects depending on which gods you choose to play with. That's another thing. The game is sort of customizable in that regard. Drafting the cards is very intense, hoping that players don't take the ones that you want. You have to take those cards and also turn order and potential points and bonuses for the next round by using these different totems, which you have certain colors of, and you have to match colors, but you have to plan ahead and make sure you're using them in the right way. Wow, really, really excellent game. I knew the first time I played it that I was going to love it, and every play afterwards I've loved it even more. It's been a hit with everyone I've played it with. Definitely deserves to have a top spot on my list. That is Elyium from Space Cowboys and Asmodee. Speaking of that other game from Space Cowboys that came out this year, yes, that game, my number 4, Time Stories. Whoo boy. As much as Pandemic Legacy has changed the landscape of gaming, at least for now, we'll have to see what the long-term reverberations of that are. I think Time Stories is even more monumental because we'd already seen Legacy before. But this idea of a game that is not replayable, which of course is the only downside of Time Stories, the only thing that keeps it from being higher on my list, in fact, but the fact that you are playing these self-contained stories, that you need to work together to solve these clues, and that everything is a surprise, you don't know what's coming up next, it's fully cooperative, you go through different story elements, thematic elements, you have different characters to take control of that in every mission, and also the fact that you are encouraged, and the game really does actively encourage you to roleplay as these characters. Few board games and card games can get me to roleplay, but this one does. All of these incredibly strong elements with fantastic storytelling that is enhanced by the players, not like just completely taken over by the players. It works in tandem with what's provided with the game. And the fact that it looks beautiful and has fantastic artwork as well, with every set having different style of artwork that's all well done so far. It's amazing. I wish I could tell you more about it, but of course this game is very spoiler heavy. Again, it does suck that you can only play each mission once, but you can't have such an amazing game experience without that element of it. There's been far more than enough said about this game, but I have to reiterate, it is phenomenal and amazing. That is Time Stories from Space Cowboys, my number 4, which should tell you how incredibly amazing the next 3 are. My number 3 was questionable to be on the list. Technically speaking, it was released at Essen in 2014, but it didn't hit wide release until early in 2015 in North America, and even the early copies they released at the end of 2014 were plagued with problems and production faults, so many people who got the game then couldn't even play it or hesitated to play it. So I'm counting it as a 2015 release, and that is Roll for the Galaxy from Rio Grande Games. I hate Race for the Galaxy. I really do. The successor, or the predecessor to this game. Never liked it. I know it's a huge hit. It's just, maybe it is just me, but I'll tell you what, even people who loved Race for the Galaxy are saying, wow, with Roll for the Galaxy, is there any reason for me to go back? I definitely think there is not. This game looks fantastic. I love the whole dice element. Anytime that you have a dice building game, I'm immediately interested. And this one has very strong Euro resource management mechanisms to back that up. There's lots of ways to mitigate the randomness of those dice, to play the way you want to play. Focus on settlements, like the home worlds, or focus on your development worlds. Different ways to get points, different ways to manage your dice in the different actions, trying to outthink your opponents and determine what by looking at their tableaus and figuring out what action are they going to choose this round. The whole action selection mechanism is just fascinating to me. There's a wonderful expansion release this year called Ambition, which I highly recommend. It won't change your mind about the game if you don't like it, but if you do already like the game, it makes it so much better. So that is easily my number 3, Roll for the Galaxy. Huge hit with everyone in my group. For my number 2 of 2015, I almost hate jumping on the bandwagon for this game because it has been talked about to death, but I can't help it. It is just that good. Blood Rage from Cool Mini or Not has everything that I love in a game. Fantastic components, fantastic artwork, great theme, awesome monster powers, card drafting, simultaneous action selection of those cards, and area control that is not too unforgiving. If you screw up in some place, you might actually get points for losing your warriors in a battle. It all depends on your play style. It has some of the best elements of Chaos in the Overworld, another game that I love, that this kind of improves upon, with the whole thing of the power meter now replaced by the rage meter, and how you can buff up those different stats in a way that you choose that you think is going to help cater to your play style as much as possible, upgrading the different cards for your warriors and other units. There's so much to love in this game. I cannot help but jump on the bandwagon with everyone else and love it as well, because I find myself clamoring for more and more and more content to play it again and again and again. The small expansions from Kickstarter are okay. They're not that necessary for once, so you don't have to worry about that. If you're just getting the retail version, definitely at least try it. You might be surprised by how much you love it, even if you are a hardcore Eurogamer. That is Blood Rage from Cool Mini or Not, easily my number 2, and let's all try to act surprised by my number 1. My number 1, to the surprise of no one who has even at least dabbled in my channel before, Kingdom Death Monster. I mean, come on, it's my number 1 game of all time on my top 100 list, and I stand by that to the death, at least at this point, no pun intended. It's... How do I describe this that I haven't already described? I did a review that was an hour long for it. So I'm not going to belabor the point too much. But as gaming experiences go, even with phenomenal experiences like Pandemic Legacy and Time Stories, to me, nothing beats Kingdom Death Monster. It is a full-fledged adventure of a game. You are fighting a monster, which you take the parts of back to the settlement to create the items that you will use to fight more monsters, to create the different buildings that will enhance your items, but also enhance your settlement. You birth children, and you train them, and they become great warriors. Then you take those warriors out with you on your next hunt, and sometimes horrible things happen to some of your survivors, but there are always more to fill up those spots and to strengthen again, and then nemesis come and fight, and they're horrifically hard, and things in this game are so brutally difficult, but it makes you appreciate the times that you succeed even more. And even finding the monsters that you hunt in order to take them back to your village to help grow it up is even a whole other game in and of itself, where you're hunting them down and trying to track them and go through different events that may hinder you as well, because that is how it would be. It would be dangerous just to find these quarries that you want to hunt and take their parts from. And the game is beautiful. The artwork is at times both horrific and beautiful at the same time. The miniatures are exquisite, even though you do have to put them together. I fully admit I could go on and on about it. I've already done so. This game is phenomenal. I know it's not for everyone. I know not everyone wants to plunk down the huge amount of money you need to buy it, but I think that if you try it, you might be surprised by what a wonderful experience it is. That is Kingdom Death Monster from designer Adam Poots. Easily my number 1, not just for the year, but as of this point of any game that I've played. Well, that's the list for this year, and again, I know it's kind of anticlimactic if you were following the top 100, but man, just to see all those games right next to each other, is that not amazing? And there's so many other games from this year that could have been on the list. I was really like, wow, Magic the Gathering Arena, the Planeswalkers isn't making it, Codenames isn't on the list, I gotta move some things around, but I couldn't. I mean, those were the 10 best. And I didn't make an 11 through 20, but I could have made an 11 through 40, probably, of just phenomenal games that came out in this past year. And as far as like what last year, I always like to look back at the previous year's list and see how things were shaking up. I'll tell you, when I put together the list, I'm like, wow, that was a solid year last year as well. I really was happy with all of my picks. Number 10 last year was Medieval Academy. Fantastic, light, family weight card drafting game, still in my collection. You can now get that worldwide from Yellow. Lords of Zidit, my number 9. Wonderful game from the designer of Seasons, a retheme of Himalaya. Fantastic components, great theme. One of the best programming games I've played, still in my collection. Tragedy Looper, my number 8. One of the most innovative games ever. This hasn't hit the table very much because it's so long and so involved and complex to teach, but I still love it. I mean, I got an expansion for it. I need to try it at some point. My number 7 was Code of 9, at that point called Owlcon, Old World and Code of 9. I still love this game. I know it's not been very well received and a lot of people hate it. I still love it greatly, so I stand by it being on my list last year. Number 6 is Arcadia Quest. Hard to believe that was on number 6 last year, but that game is hot right now. The expansion for the Kickstarter for the expansion Inferno just blew up on Kickstarter, and it's getting more and more and more recognition as time goes on, which is a great thing. My number 5 was Paperback. Wow, I can't believe Paperback was last year. It seems older than that. But Paperback was a deck building game that mixed Scrabble with deck building, and it actually works. It works wonderfully. One of the best deck builders out there. My number 4 is Xia, Legends of a Drift System, or number 4 last year was Xia, Legends of a Drift System. I remember I snuck that game in because I played it very soon towards me putting out my list last year. And so great, so great. I know some people don't like the randomness of it, but the components and the theme and the sandbox elements of the game, just love it. I can't wait to get more content for that. My number 3 was Abyss, still in my top 100 games, still in my collection. Just played a great expansion for it, the Kraken expansion. It's been a hit with everyone because it's simple and it's beautiful. My number 2 was Imperial Settlers, a top 10 game for me, and I stand by that. So good. It's, again, another game that's been a hit with everyone I've played it with in my group, or everyone I've taught it to even. Different factions, different abilities, civilization buildings, wonderful artwork and design. Totally dig that game. And of course, my number 1 last year, a lot of people's number 1 last year, or at least in the top 5, Dead of Winter, a Crossroads game from Plaid Hat Games. I was so happy to get an early copy of that game and be one of the first reviewers to review it, just so I could talk about how amazing it was. I was even a playtester for that game, one of the last few games I ever playtested before I got too busy. So glad that I did, because I have played that game probably more than any other game from the 2014, other than like Spyfall, of course. But Dead of Winter, great thematic game, the best zombie game out there. It was my number 4 game of all time on this year's list, and I stand by that for sure. Wonderful, wonderful game. I can't wait for the next Crossroads game, although I do wish it was Samurai or Summer Camp, blah, blah, blah. I keep saying that. Okay, well, that is the totality of the list for 2015. I hope you found it entertaining. I hope you found some stuff that you might enjoy. If you have not already heard of some of these games, I'm sure that you have. But that just goes to show so many AAA, Class S, top-tier games, however you want to pronounce it, for this year. Let's hope that 2016 is just as good, although that's hard to imagine. My name is Nick. This has been Board Game Brawl. Thank you so much for watching, and hey, have a Merry Christmas, Happy Holiday, great New Year, blah, 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 blah. Take care. Thanks for watching. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Patreon. And make sure to check out our sponsor, Board Game Bliss, where you can find an amazing selection of games from around the world. BoardGameBliss.com. Thanks for your support.